HP 4th Champion Part 9. Harry was escorted to the hospital wing, along with the other champions, and given an examination and a few potions before he was allowed to enjoy the rest of the day with his friends. After a quick change of clothes, Harry and his friends gathered in the Great Hall. Mandy accompanied them all, feeling that she and Harry needed to have a very long talk, but as his friends were only here for the one day, wisely decided to wait until tomorrow. It wasn't as though she would have his complete attention anyhow. Harry and his Salem friends found seats at the Hufflepuff table for lunch, and were immediately surrounded by many others, all desperate to hear about what had happened in the lake. Cedric told his tale first, explaining how he'd been set upon by a pack of Grindylows, which he dispatched with several blasting hexes. Finding the place was a real pain. Cedric said, keeping his fingers laced with chose, as if he were afraid she would disappear. But then I started hearing singing, and I followed that. As did I. Victor said. Hermione smiled up at him. I followed the sound and found Harry being held off by 4 of their guards. I thought we had all failed, and they were dead. I just wanted to get them all back up to the surface. Harry said, shaking his head. The merfolk wouldn't let me get to anyone other than Mandy. In the end, I had to hit the leader with a stream of flash-boiled water to get him to move. It was a stupid task. Both Victor and Cedric nodded. When I got to the surface, Fleur was already there, looking petrified. Cedric said, looking at Harry. She thought she had lost her sister. She was frantic. I guess she got overwhelmed by Grindylows. Stumbled on a nest or something. There were 4 people holding her from diving back into the water. I thought she might pass out when Mandy and that other girl surfaced. We thought for sure that you'd bid it down there. Mark said, examining his goblet of pumpkin juice. We couldn't see anything, and we just sat there staring at the water for any sign of you guys. Really boring. What's it like down there? Duncan asked. Dark. Harry shrugged. And cold. Cedric added, making everyone laugh. Did you guys really fight dragons? Jennifer asked, looking at the 3 male champions. I heard some girls behind us talking about it. Not so much fought, Cedric began. More like distracted. No, I'm pretty sure Harry fought his. Susan remarked. It's true. Neville said, nodding enthusiastically. Conjured chains and tried to wrestle it to the ground. Did you really? Mark asked, his eyes going wide. Oh, they are going to lose their minds over this back home. James Black, the dragon wrestler. What kind was it? Duncan asked, clearly excited by the tale. Does it matter? Stacy asked her boyfriend. It's stupid and dangerous. What is wrong with these people, coming up with a contest like that? What's next? Gladiatorial combat? I kind of think that's what we did with the dragons. Harry smirked, earning a glare from Stacy. Harry grinned. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed making her glare like that. She wasn't really angry, and there was the barest hint of a smile on her lips. It's okay. Susan grinned, nudging Harry playfully. No matter what they throw at him, Harry can handle it. If my memory is clear, I nearly just died, and I exhausted myself magically against the dragon. Harry said pointedly. Can't you just half-ass it once, Black? Potter. You know who you are. Mark said, waving his hands in exasperation, making people laugh with his antics. Why do you keep calling him Black? Victor asked. The boy you all know as Harry Potter is James Black to us. Stacy said with a smile, pointing to Harry, who's smiling now. We all just found out a little while ago. I was registered under a different name for my protection. Harry explained. We're just not used to his real name, so we just keep calling him James. Mark shrugged. It doesn't matter what his name is. Came a smooth drawling voice. Everyone turned to find Draco Malfoy standing with his arms folded defiantly, his two gorilla-like goons flanking him. He's a piss-poor excuse for a wizard. There's no doubt about that. Like you could have done what he did today, Malfoy. Mandy said vehemently, surprising those who knew her. She blushed under the sudden scrutiny, but did not lower her evil stare from Malfoy. Drown. Malfoy raised an eyebrow and sneered. Any fool could do that. Perhaps I could help you understand that by dunking your head in a cauldron, Brocklehurst. Who are you, and why did you come over here? Jennifer asked with disdain. Draco Malfoy. The pale blonde boy said with a low bow, taking Jennifer's hand and kissing it. I wondered if I might entice you to join me at the Slytherin table, where the most powerful and influential wizards are. Mark began to laugh, chuckling at first until it was a full-blown laugh, earning a glare from the Malfoy scion. Dude, if that crap worked on her, she would not be sitting here right now. I know, I tried that. He grinned, making Harry and the others crack up. I'd forgotten that month you tried to perfect a French accent because you thought it would impress her. Harry gasped. You did not. Jennifer laughed, shoving Mark, who was nodding as he laughed. It got pretty good, but I was too embarrassed to try it on you. Mark admitted. Then I saw that Robert Higgins, try to impress you with his new broom and all that talk about his family's money. After that, I figured I had no chance at all. Lucky for you I had my eye on you already then, huh? Jennifer smiled, tugging Mark closer and kissing him softly. Mark then turned to Malfoy. Look, dude, I don't know you, but I can already tell that you're a douche, and we kind of have a standing policy on douches. Mark. Stacy grimaced. That's a terrible word. But fitting. Susan and Hannah said at the same time, making Malfoy glare at them in turn. Do you have a better word to use? Mark asked. Dingleberry. Duncan suggested. Okay, stop it. We're supposed to behave ourselves. Jennifer said quickly. Thank for the invitation, but frankly, you're too feminine for me. The laughter that rang out echoed loudly in the great hall as Malfoy looked ready to burst, his face gone purple with rage. How dare you insult me? Malfoy hissed, starting to draw his wand. Before he could pull it free from within his robes, at least 10 were pointed at him. Walk away, Malfoy. Cedric said threateningly. Walk away, and keep your pride intact. Malfoy huffed, shoved his wand back in his robes and walked away. Tell me there aren't more of him here. Mark said, turning back to face Harry. Just the one. Hermione answered. But that's too much. You said you had a standing policy on douches. Victor asked. Victor? Hermione shrieked, her face coloring. He had the good sense to look apologetic, but still interested. Treat them as they treat others. Harry and Mark recited together, smiling brightly the entire time. It was you two who gave Connor Hoskins boils on his butt. Stacy said excitedly, pointing to Harry and Mark, who gave away their guilt with the sly smiles. After lunch, Harry's Hogwarts friends allowed him to spend time alone with his Salem friends. He showed them as much of the castle as he could, and told them all about life there and how it differed from Salem. They met a few of Harry's teachers, including Hagrid, Professor Flitwick, and Professor McGonagall, who came to fetch them before dinner. "It is indeed a pleasure to meet you all," she said, "but I'm afraid I have come to take you to the headmaster's office. It is time for your departure." Harry walked with his friends up to the headmaster's office to say his goodbyes. Each of them promised to write and keep him up to date on the goings-on at Salem. Stacy gave him a very long hug, and wished him luck before stepping into the Fleur, destined for the ministry. "Don't worry, we're coming back for the last one. Madame Blaylock's already arranged it all." Mark smiled, hugging his best friend. "Take care of yourself, and get a girlfriend already. I mean, this place is crawling with superb examples of womanhood. That redhead looked as if she might like to get cozier with you." "Susan?" Harry looked puzzled. "She's just a friend. I'm no expert here, but I don't think friends look at friends the way she looked at you, and she clearly doesn't like that brunette from the lake." "I don't know. I don't have time to explain it all now, but I feel like I owe Mandy." "All right." Mark shrugged. "I'll write as soon as I get back, and I want to hear about all that you're getting up to. I can't wait to tell Craig Henderson I met the Tracy Davis. He's going to wet himself. Next time, we'll get a picture of you two together." Harry laughed, and they hugged once again. Mark gave one last wave as he entered the fireplace and vanished in a swirl of green flames. Harry's heart sank a bit once all his friends were gone, and he left the headmaster's office. He wasn't quite sure where he wanted to go. Dinner was being served now, but for some reason, he didn't feel like eating. So, Harry went to his room. Almost as soon as he entered, he was overcome with exhaustion. It had been an immensely trying day, and now that his friends were gone, and the adrenaline had finally worn off, Harry could barely keep his eyes open. Shedding his clothes, Harry flopped onto his bed, and was asleep in seconds. Hannah had gone for another long walk with Neville after dinner. She was certain, especially after the Yule Ball, that she wanted to be Neville's girlfriend, but she wasn't going to push things with the boy. Hannah prided herself on being able to figure people out fairly quickly. Despite his terrible lack of confidence, which, Hannah smiled to herself, was growing by leaps and bounds, Neville had a lot of pride. If they were ever going to get together, she had to wait for him to ask. He finally had. Right before he had said good night to her, he asked her how she would feel being with him, as his girlfriend. She answered by kissing him long and hard. Of course, Neville had to be cheeky about it, and when she finally broke the kiss, he asked what her answer was. Clearly Potter, Cedric, and Crumb were rubbing off on her new boyfriend. Hannah felt as if she were walking on air as she entered the fourth-year girls' dormitory, and then her heart sank when she heard the quiet sobs. She had seen Sally Ann in the common room with Justin, and she knew Megan was still in the library. The brunette would likely slip into the common room with mere seconds to spare before curfew, as usual. This left only one possibility. "Sue?" Hannah asked. She heard a strangled sort of noise, and opened the curtain around her best friend's bed to find the redhead curled up into a ball, eyes shining with tears. "Oh, gods, what happened?" Hannah asked. "I think I'm falling in love," Susan sobbed. Hannah quickly pulled Susan up and hugged her tightly. "I'm falling in love and I can't tell him." "Who?" Hannah asked, pulling away a bit to look at Susan, who could only stare at the floor. "Harry," she said very quietly, as if the boy could hear her. "I knew it," Hannah said triumphantly. Susan looked up in wonderment. "You knew? Kind of hard not to. You spend all your time with him." Hannah smiled. "That's 'cause you're always with Neville," Susan argued. "Yeah, but you could easily hang out with 100 other people, but you choose to go spend time with Harry." My new boyfriend's best friend here at Hogwarts. Then, there's all the little nudges and the fact that you always pour him orange juice every morning. He may not see it, most everyone else might be ignorant of it, but I knew. Hannah grinned, grabbing a handkerchief from the bedside table and offering it to her best friend. So, what am I supposed to do? Susan asked. My gods, you saw that girl Stacy. She's gorgeous. And she'll be waiting for him when he gets back there. Yeah, she was attractive, but she's in a whole other country. Plus, you're no slouch. My gods, do you ever look at yourself in the mirror at all? Lavender brown would kill for your figure. I'd cut off my right arm for half you boobs. And let's not even get started on you legs or your butt. And, to top it off, you're kind of brilliant. So what if she's waiting for him? You're here now. Plus, I think she was dating that short guy. And what about Mandy? Susan asked. Or that Gabrielle? He's been pining over Mandy since the Yule Ball, and Gabrielle is like his own personal stalker. Oh, yeah, of little faith. Hannah rolled her eyes. He's not going to pick Mandy over you. She's way too wishy-washy. You're incredibly confident. Well, normally. Sure, Harry and Mandy might go out for a while, but we both know it won't last. He feels like he owes her something. He doesn't like her, He's trying to make up for his blunder at the Yule Ball. And because of that, it's going to end badly. I wouldn't even know how to tell him. Susan shook her head. And besides, what's the point? He'll be gone in just a few months. Well, with that attitude, maybe you should just forget about him altogether. Hannah groaned, getting up off the bed and going to her trunk to get her bed things. What do you mean? Susan asked, no getting upset for a different reason. Look, Sue, Hannah turned to face her best friend. Yes, he's going to be gone in a few months, but can you imagine a more blissful way to spend those months than being held by him? Taking walks around the lake, or finding a broom cupboard and snogging him until neither of you can see straight. Heck, you might even take a risk and let him feel you up. Susan got a rather far away look in her eyes and blushed, as Hannah went on. Look at his track record so far. He needs someone who's going to understand when he screws up. Someone with patience, brains, and big boobs. Why do you always bring those up? Susan rolled her puffy eyes. I don't know why you don't flaunt them more. You'd have every guy in the castle following you like a lost puppy. The point here is, Harry is different from most of the guys we're used to. He's clearly more mature than most. The only time I've ever noticed him becoming unsure of himself is when it comes to girls. Come on, even you noticed how he kept running away from anything with breasts before he had his date for the Yule Ball. And, sure, he gets a little juvenile when he's around that Mark bloke. I thought he was rather endearing. I thought he was pretty relaxed around us, but today I saw him really let his guard down. I liked what I saw in him. We all did, but we're getting off track. Look, you've got a more solid base for a relationship with him than anyone else in this school. But you're also going to have to deal with a lot. He is Harry Potter, savior of England's Wizarding Society. Hannah rolled her eyes as she said this. You know how many girls are fawning over him. Do you think you can handle all of that, even for a few months? If so, then come clean, and tell him. Don't waste any more time than you have already. Susan sighed and Hannah collected her things and went into the bathroom to ready herself for bed. Susan sat down on her bed and thought about what Hannah had said to her. She hadn't considered all of it before. Harry was an icon to the wizarding populace, and as such, there would be many opinions on who the right match for him should be. As such, he could be under immense pressure about whom he should date. But, then again, if that really were the case, would he even bother with people like Hermione Granger or Luna Lovegood? Would he be the type to go after a girl because that was who he was supposed to be with, or would he be with someone because that's who he wanted to be with? And if that was the case, what was going to happen between him and Mandy? Even more puzzling to the red-headed Hufflepuff was the question of whether or not she was truly worthy of Harry. Did she possess the patience and strength of mind to be Harry's love? Did anyone in the castle? Susan would have to think about these things over the next few days before she made any decision regarding what to do about her feelings for the ebony-haired boy. Perhaps she could wait to see what came of the situation with Brocklehurst. Maybe Hannah was right and Harry and Mandy wouldn't last long at all. Then, maybe, she would have a chance with the green-eyed boy who made her smile so easily. Something clicked in her mind and she suddenly sat bolt upright, calling towards the bathroom. Did you say you had a boyfriend? Hi, Harry. Mandy smiled as the boy approached the great hall for breakfast. Could we talk? Yeah. I suppose. In private, please. Harry noticed that she looked very nervous, and allowed her to lead him to wherever she wished to talk to him. It was Sunday, and breakfast would be available for a few more hours yet. Mandy slipped into a classroom, with Harry behind her. She cast several privacy charms before she turned to look at Harry. I want to apologize to you for being such a... Her voice lowered to a whisper, her cheeks going a soft pink. Bitch. Harry smiled and shook his head. I told you yesterday that I deserved it. Maybe, but maybe not. The truth is, you're the first boy to ever have asked me out, and when things went the way they did, I was crushed. But, I've done a lot of thinking since we last spoke. I mean a lot of thinking. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. I've seen how you've looked at me these past weeks, and I keep wondering if it's because you feel guilty, or if it's because of something else. Something deeper. Harry ran his hands through his perpetually messy hair and took a seat on top of one of the unused desks. He looked at her impassive face and wondered exactly what he was supposed to say here. In truth, he wasn't sure what he felt for Mandy at all. He knew that he liked her, and had missed her company, but was there more to it than a friendship? I don't know. Harry finally said. I like you, and I've definitely missed you, but I don't know if there's anything more. I thought so. Mandy said, though she didn't appear upset. I feel like I robbed us of something. Harry began but Mandy cut him off. No, you didn't. She said flatly. There was nothing there to rob. To be perfectly honest with you, Harry, I'm not even sure how I felt about you before all of this mess. I liked you as a friend, to be sure, and yeah, the thought of dating you was nice, but I didn't know if I liked you that way. Then, why did you go to the ball with me? Harry asked, confused now. Because you asked me. Mandy said as if it were obvious. You asked me, and I wanted to go to the ball. Harry, I don't know if you know this or not, but you are one of the most sought-after boys in this school. Most girls won't talk to you because they're intimidated. We grew up with this legend of the super powerful baby who supposedly died, and boom, here you are alive and extremely cute. Harry blushed, but Mandy ignored it and continued. To make it better, you go out of your way to make friends with people who most people see as a waste. Hermione, Luna, Neville, me. You've shown how truly great you are by standing up for people who couldn't do it for themselves. And let's not forget what you've done in the tournament, Harry. You're like the real-life embodiment of some romantic figure. But I don't want to be seen that way. Harry argued, and Mandy stepped towards him. I know that. But I know that because I've spent time with you, Harry. And it's also because I've spent time with you that I don't know if you and I would be a good thing. You're an amazing guy, and maybe in a few years, when you've mellowed out some, or I've figured out who I am. Mandy shrugged as she looked into his green eyes. I just don't think this is the time for us. I can't give you what you need. You sound like Luna. Harry sighed. She seemed to think you and I wouldn't be a good match. Did she say who you'd be good with? Mandy asked, coming to his side and sitting next to him. Harry nodded as he watched her sit down. He thought me and Sue would be good. Sully? No, trust me, Harry. She's my friend and I love her, but Sue's going to end up with someone based solely on their worth. She's brilliant and all, but she's also pretty shallow. She wants to be a trophy wife. Well, then, I guess she's out. Harry chuckled. I am really sorry about everything, you know, he said, looking at her. She nudged him and smiled her sweet soft smile. I am, too. But now we can have a friendship for the ages. And Harry, I know in my heart that whoever you choose to be with will love you more than any girl has ever loved a boy, whether she's here at Hogwarts, at your own school, or you haven't even met her yet. Thanks, Mandy. Harry smiled. A few moments later, they headed off to the Great Hall for breakfast. You know, I have the option of staying here after the tournament, he said idly. Mandy stopped short and stared at him with shock. Are you kidding me? She asked, her eyes bulging. Yeah. Harry shrugged. I haven't told anyone, and I'd like it if you kept it to yourself. Why haven't you told anyone? Mandy asked, hooking her arm through Harry's and beginning to walk again. I don't want anyone to try and influence my decision. I like it here, for the most part, but I'm torn. You'd miss your friends too much. Mandy sighed, and Harry nodded. If you chose to remain, I know your friends would support you. You know that, too. Again, Harry nodded. Can I ask how you're feeling about it right now? She asked curiously. Harry shrugged. For like the first month I was hardcore, you know, I wanted to stay. But then the whole thing with Tracy happened, and it kind of soured everything. Then we were okay, and again, I was back on the I want to stay at Hogwarts train. Then, all this stuff with you and me, and once again, I wanted just to go back to Salem and forget everyone and everything about this place. Now. Harry shrugged again, looking all around at the stone corridor. I just don't know. Seeing my friends again really made me realize just how much I would miss them, but also that they've been getting along fine without me. Better in fact. Harry, no matter where you are, life moves forward. You're not there with them, but they all still care about you, they still love you. It's the same with all the people who call themselves your friend here. If you chose to return to Salem, we'd all miss you, but we wouldn't stop caring for you. She nudged him, poking his ribs, making him squirm and laugh. You have to weigh the good and the bad and make the decision that is going to make you happy. Harry nodded and thanked her for her advice and her promise of secrecy. She gave him a chaste kiss on the cheek, and when they reached the Great Hall, she left him to join her own friends, though she promised they'd still meet to study later that night. Susan, Mandy, and Hermione joined Harry in the library to finish up the latest Transfiguration homework. Harry was truly happy to spend time with Hermione, who kept blushing whenever Harry expressed how good it was to see her. Okay, stop it. I get it. Hermione rolled her eyes. I spend too much time with Victor. I'm sorry. Gods, Harry, it's not like you've been alone all this time. Susan said. I know. Susan, you have been my lifeline, and I will never be able to truly express my thankfulness. Harry said dramatically. But, Hermione and I have a special connection. He said, clutching up her hand, making Hermione laugh at his antics. Enough. She laughed, swatting his hand. I'd really like to get this done tonight, if you don't mind. He thinks he's so funny. Mandy grinned. Monsieur Potter. Harry and the girls turned to see Fleur Delacour stand rigidly behind Harry. Hi. Harry said, looking at Fleur strangely. May I speak with you, in private? Harry shrugged and got up, looking to his three friends, giving them each a bewildered look. He followed the slender blonde out of the library and into the hall, where she turned to speak to him. I wish very much to apologize for how I have treated you. I have been very rude and conceited, and you have proven to me that you are the greater wizard. I wish you to know that I have no intention of trying to win this tournament. I thought we couldn't get out of it? Harry asked, puzzled. I thought we'd lose our magic. That is true, but there is nothing in the rules about simply not trying. I have every intention of not even trying to finish the final task. Some things are far more important than eternal glory. Fleur smiled softly. Why would you do that? Harry asked, truly confused. You could win it just as easily as any of us. As I said, some things are more important. I thought I had lost me sister. Of course, it wasn't until it was all over that I learned that she was not in danger. I agree with you. 3 of us entered of our own free will. You did not, and with each task, you outperform the rest of us. If you were of age, I have no doubt that you would have been leaving us behind you. I can't let you just sit it out. Harry said, shaking his head. Listen, why don't you join me and the others tomorrow morning? We take a jog around the pitch every morning. Train with us. I mean, this whole thing is supposed to be about making friends, right? Harry smiled and Fleur nodded after a moment's thought. I will join you, but I do not think I will change my mind, Harry Potter. Maybe you will after we talk tomorrow. Harry smiled. Look, I know it's last minute, Neville, but can you sit this one out today? Harry asked Neville, who showed up right on time for their morning jog. Sure. Neville shrugged. Can I ask why, though? Harry felt a pang of guilt as he saw the hint of disappointment in Neville's eyes. I'm really sorry, you can join us tomorrow, but I need to talk to the champions alone, and I don't want anyone to hear what I'm planning. I swear I'll make it up to you. No, don't worry about it, Neville said. Despite Harry's poor explanation, Neville realized he wasn't being blown off. I'll see you in herbology. You'll see me at breakfast. And by the way, congratulations. Susan told me you asked out Hannah. Neville got a really funny looking grin on his face and he thanked Harry as Cedric came round the corner. Where's he going? Cedric asked as Neville headed back up the stairs. I asked him to sit out today. I've got something I want to propose to you, Victor and Fleur. What? Cedric asked, astonished at hearing the French champion's name. They headed onto the grounds where they met Victor, who was standing with a very nervous-looking blonde in powder blue sweatpants and sweatshirt. Good morning. Harry smiled. I do not know why she has come. Victor said softly, looking pointedly at Fleur. I asked her to come. Harry smiled. Let's get to it, before I get too cold. They made the first circuit easily before Harry began. I've thought about this a lot, but I never thought it would even be possible. He started. They all listened, huffing at his side. Through whatever circumstances, we've all become friends, and I for one, don't like the thought of having to go up against my friends to win some stupid contest. I don't care about going down in the history books. You're already in the history books. Cedric chuckled. Whatever. The point is, I think we have the chance here to do something that has never ever been done before. We could work together and win this whole damn thing. Together. Harry said. Silence, with the exception of their heavy breathing, fell on them. How do you propose we do this? Victor asked. We do not yet know what the last task will be. We can figure that out once we learn what the last task will be. In the meantime, we train together, just like we have been. We find new spells, learn them together. We keep on as we have been, but all four of us. It would be a first in the history of the Triwizard Tournament. Cedric said thoughtfully. We could easily split the 1,000 galleons. All four schools get the glory because we work together. Harry said. And, it's better than just sitting it out and not even trying. Harry gave Fleur a pointed look. She was clearly contemplating what he said. Harry noticed that she was chewing on her lip the same way Hermione did when she was working on something vexing. I think it is a very good idea. She said finally. I will do it. Fleur smiled softly. Harry, you have been a great friend to me, and because of you, I have met Hermione, and Cedric, and now Fleur. You have shown great strength, immense power, and a good heart, Victor said firmly. I will join you as well in lifting the cup not for Durmstrang, but for our friendship. Oh, hell, who am I to stand in the way of history? Cedric grinned. Count me in, as well. Harry stopped running and they all stopped as well to look at his wide grin. Seriously? He asked, looking at each of them in turn. 'Cause, I stayed up half the night working out this whole spiel about unity and the power of friendship and a bunch of other crap. Both Victor and Cedric laughed, while Fleur simply smiled nervously. As far as she was concerned, she was still an outsider, even though the other three champions had accepted her without question. She was going to have to apologize to Gabrielle later, and that irked her quite a bit. Harry, we all agreed. We're in. Cedric said, clapping a hand on the younger boy's shoulder. I'm already altering the story so that it was my idea. Harry cocked his head and rolled his eyes at Cedric's joke. Cedric, it was my idea. Victor remarked, giving a grin. Don't go taking all the credit. All right. Harry threw his hands up. But, let's keep this between us until we finish this thing, all right. Agreed. Fleur nodded, as did Cedric and Victor. They finished out their run, the boys joking and rambling about unimportant topics. Fleur lost herself in her thoughts about Harry Potter. She could honestly say that she had never in her life even have hoped to meet a more noble and upstanding man, and to make things more perplexing, he was only 14. Fleur actually frowned at that thought. Were Harry a few years older, she would court him. A man like that was almost unheard of. Yet, one thought plagued her. Would he be able to resist her allure? What she wanted most was a man who was immune to her villa charms. From what Gabrielle had said of Harry, he had been able to resist her attempts to ensnare him. But Gabrielle was still young. Fleur was much more skilled at using her natural villa wiles to get what she desired of men. Which is why she felt most men were beneath her. She wanted someone strong, not only physical and magically speaking, but mentally, as well. But, Harry was simply not old enough for her. Perhaps in a few years, after he had matured more. If that were possible given his seemingly high level of maturity now. She heard one of the boys make a rather crude joke, apparently forgetting there was a lady present, and Harry laughed the loudest. Okay, so there was room for improvement, after all. Still, if she did not find someone suitable in the future, perhaps she would think of arranging to visit Harry. At the same time, Fleur began assessing the other two champions. Clearly, they were both strong, and Victor was quite famous already. Not that she cared much about his fame, only about his strength of will. She knew he was currently seeing that young girl with the very bushy hair. But that could not be Sirius. Cedric was much more attractive to Fleur than Victor, with his boyish smile and his soft brown hair. And, just like the other two, very powerful, magically speaking. But, Cedric just didn't quite do anything for her. She tore her thoughts away from dating any of these three boys. Right now, they were allies. Friends. Once the tournament was over, and she finished school, there would be plenty of time for worrying about finding a man to love her. She had waited this long, she could hold out a little longer for the same happiness her mother and father shared, couldn't she? Yes, she could. She was strong, and now she would prove it. She would not be the weakest link in this alliance. She would endure, and she would emerge a true champion, standing shoulder to shoulder with her new friends. Friends who had accepted her without question, without agendas. They simply wished to be a friend. She would not let them down. It was very late, and the low firelight made the shadows dance as he sat in his high-backed chair, staring into the crackling flames. He always thought of himself as a patient man, but as his plans were coming close to fruition, his anticipation grew with each passing day. His most loyal servant had been found out, and had barely escaped with his life. Now, he had no one he felt he could trust at the school with whom to get a report on the boy's progress. There was Snape, but he was unsure if the man was still loyal to him. His servant had reported that Snape was nothing more than Dumbledore's mindless stooge, but he knew the slippery black-haired man better than most. Snape had been under Dumbledore's thumb for far too many years, it was true, but he had always been one of his best and most faithful. Soon, he would know. Soon, he would know exactly who had remained loyal to him. The most distressing problem he had now was how to get the boy to him. The boy was essential to his plans, for a number of reasons. Most importantly, his blood, and the powerful protections embedded in each precious drop. He had had nearly 14 years to contemplate what had gone wrong that night. 14 years of suffering in which he could analyze all that he had not taken into account when he'd tried to kill the one foretold to be his end. And the boy very nearly had been. He shivered slightly as he remembered the pain he had endured those many long years. But soon, there would be no doubt of his greatness. He was so very close to rising once again. He could already feel his power building in his rudimentary veins. He curled his tiny fingers, and saw the power radiating from them. Once he completed the ritual, he would have his body back, and then, he would lay waste to all who stood against him, starting with the boy, and then, that old muggle-loving moron, Dumbledore. He sighed heavily as he felt the prickle in the back of his mind. The boy was feeling confused. He had discovered the connection to the boy many years ago, though it was weak at the time. At first, he thought he had been losing his mind. Strange flashes of distant places, or feelings of joy that would sicken him. As time went on, he would get flashes from the boy when he was at his most vulnerable, and those flashes always sickened him. Especially when the boy began his education. The disgusting highs the boy had over insignificant victories. Racing on a broom, or running through some corridor, evading capture after some prank. But it was the people that made these flashes nearly unbearable. People whom the boy cared for deeply. He had every intention of punishing these people for the crime of caring for the boy. He vowed to see each and every one of them dead at his feet. This was how he knew that Dumbledore had lied to the world. He knew that Harry Potter lived. He knew the boy was being hidden from the public. And it was this knowledge that always emboldened him to find a way to resurrect himself. To exact his revenge. The first, real step had come at last when that waste of flesh had found him in the dark forests of Albania. As incompetent as Wormtail was, he was able to follow basic instruction and conjured the rudimentary body he needed. Wormtail had also managed to kill a unicorn and drain the blood for the sustenance he would need until he could perform the ritual that would return him to a body. Wormtail had also provided him information. He now knew exactly what had become of his followers. And the unexpected gift of the ministry which that led him to his second follower, and the idea which could provide him with the one thing he desired above all else. Both of his servants expressed disbelief when he had revealed his plan, but they never questioned him, and did their tasks faithfully. Crouch much better than Wormtail, of course. Everything had fallen into place. The boy had needed surprisingly little help, which bolstered his confidence in choosing to use the boy. Crouch had reported that the boy had shown amazing power in the first task. The papers had reported the boy's resourcefulness. Though, there had been a close call, as the boy had nearly drowned in the effort. But, there was still one last task for the boy to get through, and now that Crouch had been discovered, there was cause for concern. He needed to make a portkey to bring the boy to him. He needed to make sure the boy retrieved the cup first. He could not go himself. He wished to keep his resurrection secret until he was ready to begin his new campaign. That left one person. One who had the gift for concealment, and who could sneak onto the grounds and see to it that the boy made it through the last task. Yes, Wormtail would most likely be caught, but Wormtail was nothing if not bloodthirsty and loyal. As incompetent as he was, Wormtail had a vicious streak in him that sometimes rivaled that of his fair Bellatrix. The Ministry would get nothing from him were he to be caught, which he almost assuredly would be. But a simple embryo and Wormtail would kill himself before being taken into custody. "Wormtail," he called out in his raspy cold voice. "I have need of you." He heard the heavy footfalls of the heavy man as he raced up the stairs. In a moment, Wormtail was on his knees, prostrating himself before his master. "How may I serve you, milord?" As he stared at the balding crown of the inferior wizard, he smiled a sinister, maniacal grin as he sat himself up a little more. He had much to plan, and little time to make sure it was perfect. Sirius opened the door of his house and was taken aback to find Dumbledore and Snape standing there, waiting to be allowed into the house. "Albus." "Good evening, Sirius. I am deeply sorry that I didn't give you warning that we would be visiting, but I'm afraid we can no longer put it off. May we come in?" Dumbledore smiled benignly. "Of course, please," Sirius said, taking a step back to allow entrance. Dumbledore gave a genial nod as he passed, but Snape kept his black eyes straight ahead. Sirius shut the door and led them into the sitting room, where Remus was sitting, poring over several scraps of parchments. "Albus," he said, looking up at the newcomers. "Severus." "Good evening, Remus. I'm very glad that you are here. I would very much appreciate your input on what we must discuss." "Of course. Is Harry all right?" the werewolf asked. "So far as I know, he is perfectly fine. Likely enjoying the company of Miss Bones, Miss Granger and Miss Brocklehurst. They have been near constant companions of his since the second task." "Can I get tea for anyone?" Sirius asked. "No need," Dumbledore said, pulling a large bottle of mead from his robes. "Please, sit." Dumbledore conjured 4 glasses, and poured generous amounts of the amber liquid into them. Each man took their glass and tried to get more comfortable in their seats. With the tournament ending in 2 weeks. "I confess myself curious as to if Harry has expressed anything regarding the possibility of matriculating to Hogwarts after this year is complete," Dumbledore asked. Remus looked to Sirius, who gave a slight shrug. "We talked to him yesterday when he visited, but it wasn't mentioned," Sirius said flatly. "He's been on the fence about it most of the year. When things are going well, he's pretty gung-ho about being here. But when he's hit speed bumps, and especially after seeing his old friends." "That is pretty much as I expected," Dumbledore said. "I would very much like it if he chose to remain here when the year was out. It would make things much easier. As it stands, I believe it would be dangerous for him to return to Salem Academy. Now that our world knows he is alive, and where he's been all this time, he is vulnerable once again." "You want to keep him here for his protection, then?" Sirius asked, but Dumbledore held up a hand. "That is merely part of the reason," the old headmaster replied. "Harry had unfortunately been handed a very integral role to play in coming events. And now that people know he's alive, it will be very difficult to hide him once again. especially if things move forward as I predict they might. This has to do with the reason Voldemort went after him, doesn't it? Sirius asked, sitting forward. Snape grimaced, and shifted in his seat. Remus and Sirius turned to look at the man who'd been their enemy when they had all been in school. It does. Dumbledore confirmed. Shortly before Harry was born, I was interviewing a candidate for the post of divination. I met with a young woman, who had done little to impress me. That is, until the conclusion of our interview, when she actually made a prophecy. A real prophecy. Remus and Sirius stared at Dumbledore, hanging on every word. The old wizard took a great breath before continuing. Before I had the chance to question the seer, there was a commotion just outside the room. When I opened the door, I found my brother in a brawl with a young man, whom I recognized at once. Dumbledore turned to Snape. Sirius and Remus turned to Snape. Snape felt his face heating up, but he looked to each man in turn before speaking. I was trying to better my standing in the Dark Lord's circle, he said bitterly. Aberforth found me before I heard the total of the prophecy. When I managed to escape, I went straight to him and reported all I had heard. He was desperate to learn what Dumbledore was doing to stop him, and this troubled him. He gathered us, and set us to find this threat. After a time, he narrowed it down to 2 families. The Longbottoms. And the Potters. Sirius hissed, his eyes darkening. It was you. You're the one responsible for all of this. Sirius began to rise from his seat, his anger burning in his veins. Remus clutched his arm and tugged him back onto the sofa. Let's hear everything before we start hexing one another, he said quickly. You both know that Lily was my friend when we were in school. Even though we had grown apart, I still cared about her. When I found out of the Dark Lord's intentions, I went to Dumbledore and begged him to hide James and Lily. It was then that I pledged myself to stop him. I was beginning to realize then how wrong I had been in choosing to serve him. As you both know, we had a spy in our midst, though we didn't know who it was. It was that spy who eventually became secret keeper for James and Lily. Wormtail. Remus and Sirius spoke the name as if it left a foul taste on the tongues. Wormtail vanished after that night, taking refuge in his animagus form until you nearly tracked him down, Remus. It is my belief that he immediately sought out his master. Having donned the role of pet to one of the students, he would have heard the stories that would have told him that his master was alive. And, that leads us to where we stand now. Sirius and Remus watched Dumbledore as he took a long sip of his mead. Voldemort is on the verge of rising to power again. I do not know how, but I am confident he has found a way in which to return himself to his full power. You told us that already, Sirius pointed out. In case you've forgotten, we've been contacting people who might help us against him. No, I have not forgotten. Dumbledore smiled. My memory is as good as it ever was. Lord Voldemort will rise very soon, and I believe he will have 2 goals. The first will be to get a hold of the actual prophecy. He did not know the full contents of the prophecy. If he had, I believe he would have taken a different course of action. And his second? Remus asked. To finish what he began that night nearly 14 years ago. Kill Harry. Sirius said softly. So, what does this prophecy say? Remus wondered. I think it best that we wait until Harry is present to discuss that further. In fact, it is my intention to take Harry to the Hall of Prophecies, where he may collect it for himself. Suffice to say that I believe that this war will only end after Harry faces Lord Voldemort. Whoa! Sirius stood up now, dropping his glass, allowing it to shatter on the floor. Harry can't face him, he'd be slaughtered. Yes, Harry's powerful, there's no doubt in my mind about that. There's no doubt in anyone's mind after his display in the first task. But facing that monster... Calm down, Sirius. Remus tried, but Sirius turned to stare coldly at his best friend. Calm down? He's talking about having Harry square off against the most diabolical dark wizard in ages, and you're asking me to be calm? I swore I would protect Harry with everything I possessed. I'll die before I allow that monster near Harry. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Snape said. Sirius turned to the sallow-skinned man with something akin to incredulity. What? Sirius asked, looking truly puzzled. The Dark Lord will let nothing stand in his way this time, Snape said quickly. He's had 14 years in which to plan. 14 years in which he has had to reflect on his previous mistakes, and begin to think of better methods in which to move forward in his campaign of domination. This war will be very different than the last, and it will cost us much more. I believe Harry is the key to victory. Dumbledore jumped in. Lord Voldemort delved quite deeply into the dark arts. More deeply than any before him. I have only just begun to learn of the enchantments he pursued to protect himself. You think Harry can undo these enchantments? Remus asked quizzically. Dumbledore simply shrugged. I am unsure, but I do know that Lord Voldemort fears Harry, and what he will represent. He will carry with him the hopes and the prayers of our world. When the tournament concludes, I promise to tell him everything about why his parents were sentenced to death, and my theories on how he survived. I will then ask him to stay here at Hogwarts, where I plan to teach him all I can so that when the day comes, and do not have any illusions, Harry will be able to fight Lord Voldemort. Unfortunately, I don't think you have much to worry about. Sirius groaned as he sat down again. Harry's got this damned noble streak in him. He's had it all his life. It's like he seeks out the weaker and smaller and befriends them, just so he can defend them against bigger, tougher kids, or what have you. If you ask him to fight, he will. I disagree. Remus spoke up. I don't know Harry as well as you do, Sirius, but I think if you lay this all on him, he's going to freak out. He's going to want to run. This is just way too much for him. You're putting the weight of the world on a kid's shoulders. My gods, we'll be lucky if he doesn't crack up. Have faith in him, Snape said softly. Everyone turned to look at him once again. He looked up at them and took a great breath. I think that the boy will be overwhelmed, and yes, he may even choose to run. But it won't last. He's made a great many friends here. People he cares for. In time, I think he would want to come back to do all he could to protect them, just as Sirius said. Any time away is time we lose. Potential lives that can be extinguished. Dumbledore said heavily. I need your help in convincing him to stay. We will. But, what if he chooses to leave? Sirius asked pointedly. What if he decides he wants nothing to do with any of this? Then, we will not force him. We will do all we can to protect him for as long as we can. I will not take away his choice," Dumbledore said adamantly. "If he does stay," Remus began. "It won't be safe for us to remain here in Hogsmeade." "I have already thought about that." Dumbledore smiled. "As I believe the Order of the Phoenix will be active once again, we shall need a place in which to meet and plan. A place that is already heavily warded, but that we can add more protective charms to. And most importantly, a place where Harry will be able to visit with friends, and be visited by them in turn. Some place connected to the Fleur. It is my hope that you would be agreeable to return to your family home, Sirius." "Oh, damn it." Sirius's head fell. "Albus, you don't know what you're asking. That place is like a damn tomb. I can't make Harry stay there. Isn't there someplace else we can go? Someplace else that's just as warded?" "I am afraid the only other place as well protected as your parents' house that I can think of would be Lucius Malfoy's home." Dumbledore gave another mischievous smile. "Damn you, Albus," Sirius said in defeat. "Fine, but I want to be able to take Harry on vacation." "Of course." Dumbledore nodded. "As I said, I wish for Harry to have every freedom we can allow him." "Fine." Sirius sighed heavily. "Remus and I can go there tomorrow and begin preparing it for habitation." "Very good." Dumbledore rose. "Harry's friends from Salem will be arriving for the final task at 8 a.m. on the 24th. There will be a reception for the champions at 10, which you two are welcome to attend, as you are Harry's family." "We'll be there." Remus nodded. "I had no doubt. Shall we, Severus?" Dumbledore turned to his potions master. Snape looked up to the headmaster and shook his head. "If it's all the same to you, I would like to speak to Remus and Sirius alone." Dumbledore hid a smile and nodded. "I expected as much. Very well. I bid you all a very good night." Dumbledore let himself out and the three who remained stared at one another for a few moments. Finally, Snape cleared his throat. "I never would have believed it if I had not experienced it myself," he started. "You should be proud, Black. Harry is truly a remarkable young man." Sirius felt as if Snape had just reached out and slapped him. Never in 1,000 lifetimes would he ever have expected Severus Snape to pay him any sort of compliment. "Excuse me." Sirius stuttered. "Did he ever tell you of our conversation?" Snape asked, leaning forward in his seat and clasping his hands together. "Dumbledore told us that you two had a conversation a few days after that incident," Remus remarked. "The one where you assaulted him," Sirius said, his tone becoming cold. "Not my finest hour," Snape nodded. Sirius noticed the faint hint of sadness in Snape's eyes. "When he first arrived, I could not see past the near mirror image of James Potter, and all my hatred boiled to the surface. It was Harry who truly made me see how pathetic I have been. How I've wasted my life." "He did?" Remus looked surprised. "What did he say to you?" "He told me that Lily would have been ashamed of me," Snape said simply. "You really did love her, didn't you?" Sirius said softly. "We used to razz James about you being his biggest competition. We weren't that far off the mark, were we?" Snape said nothing, but gave the slightest of nods. Sirius dropped his head and sat back in his seat. Remus gave a sympathetic look to the man whose life he'd played a part in making miserable while at school. "I'm sorry." Sirius spoke quite softly, nearly being lost in the crackle of the fire. "For all I did to you, Severus. I was young, and immature, and just stupid. I'm not going to ask for forgiveness, but just know I'm sorry." Snape rose from his seat now and looked at Sirius for a long moment. "I knew you were sorry for everything after I observed Harry for a while. No child turns out that well-adjusted and upstanding without someone to emulate and attempt to make proud. I only hope that, one day, you will be able to forgive me, though I have much more to ask forgiveness for." "Severus," Sirius stood up, and offered his hand in friendship. "If you do everything in your power to protect Harry, then there will be nothing to forgive." Snape nodded and without another word, left to return to the castle. "Where's Harry?" Hermione asked as she sat down with Hannah, Susan, Mandy, and Neville in the library. End-of-term exams were fast approaching, and the new group of friends were gathering to study. "He and Cedric went to train," Neville said, not looking up from his Transfiguration book. "The final task is coming up, and they're working harder and harder." Susan looked up as Hermione and Ginny, who'd tagged along, took seats. "I just hope they don't exhaust themselves before they even get to the task." "Maybe you could help relax Harry," Hannah smirked, making the redhead's face match her fiery hair. "Shut up," Susan snapped. "You like Harry?" Mandy asked, looking up with surprise. "Oh, come on." Ginny rolled her eyes. "Who doesn't like Harry? Just about every girl in this school wants to shag him rotten." "I overheard Katie Bell and Alicia Spinnet talking about doing things to Harry that I'd never even heard of." "Yeah, but no one has spent as much time with that boy than our dear Susan here," Hannah smirked, giving her best friend a playful shove. "They've been nearly inseparable. It's not like I have anyone else to hang out with. My best friend is always out with her boyfriend now," Susan said, giving Hannah a dirty look who simply stuck out her tongue. "I've noticed that you always sit next to him at meals, and you always have a glass of orange juice for him at breakfast," Neville said, looking up from his book with interest. He considered Harry his closest male friend, and if the girls were talking about him, he wanted to be a part of it, in case Harry needed defending. "Maybe I'm just being a good friend," Susan tried, but Hannah wasn't having any of it. "Yes, because friends stare longingly at their friends when they walk away. Or run their finger through said friend's hair to get it out of their eyes, or accidentally brush up against them, or find any reason they can to touch their friend." "All right," Susan finally said, glaring at Hannah, who was now giggling. "If you like him, why don't you say something?" Hermione wondered, but Susan shrugged. "Just scared," Susan admitted. "It's not like a relationship with him could last." "You never know," Mandy said. She, of course, was the only one who knew that Harry had the option for staying at Hogwarts if he chose. Mandy really wanted Harry to stay because he'd proven to be the greatest friend she'd ever had. She also knew that Neville and Hermione shared the same feeling, though neither of them knew his secret. "Harry's so full of surprises that he might figure a way for a relationship to last with someone he really likes, and I think he might like you." "What makes you say that?" Susan looked to the shy Ravenclaw, who shrugged. "He doesn't shy away from you when you are near him. In fact, he flirts back." "She's right," Ginny said. He can't even look at Lavender anymore without blushing. I think she really scared him. Do any of you know what she said to him the last time they had one of their battle of wills? Neville looked around excitedly. He blushes like a little girl whenever Cedric brings it up. I do, but I ain't repeating it. Ginny grinned maniacally. It was really lurid. Hermione chuckled softly. Ginny began to chuckle as well, both girls turning pink as they remembered Harry and Lavender's last battle of wills. Hermione thought they were more exercises in luridness, especially after Lavender's very indecent proposal to Harry, which left the boy a stammering mess for days. So, you're saying I'm safe for him? Susan looked as if she might be offended. I think what we're all saying is that you're not going to freak him out, and your relationship will progress at a natural speed that is comfortable for the both of you. Hannah smirked. So, the question remains, why don't you do something about it? Look, this is all pointless, all right. Susan groaned. He's leaving in a few weeks, and that's that. I mean, what about you, Hermione? What's going to happen with you and Victor? Good luck getting her to tell you anything about what they get up to. Ginny rolled her eyes. Hermione gave Ginny a glare, then turned to Susan and shrugged. We've talked about it a lot, and we both know that it's never going to be serious. What are you talking about? Mandy asked. Why not? Our lives are on very different paths. Hermione smiled. We both care for each other, but we don't have any illusions about what this is between us. When the year is over, and he goes back to Bulgaria, then we're done. You're just done. Ginny looked aghast. What? Hermione looked to her best friend with puzzlement. I told you we've talked about it. Neither of us is broken up over it. Yes, it won't be great when it's over, but he's got his career, and he'll be finished with school. I still have 3 years to go and I still have no idea what I want to do with my life. By the time I'm out of school, who knows where his life will have taken him, and I will not let him miss an opportunity because he doesn't want to leave me behind. We promised to keep in touch, but for now, it's just impractical for us to try and maintain a relationship. Wow, Mandy said glumly. I definitely don't have your practicality. If it were me, I'd never let him get away. I'm still young, and to be honest, I don't see myself ending up with him and starting a family. I think I'd like someone a bit more down to earth. Hermione shrugged. That's so depressing. Susan said sadly. What? Hermione looked shocked. I don't know about any of you, but I don't expect to meet my future husband while I'm 15. But you don't know if you will or not, Hannah argued. Well, of course not. He might be in this very room. But, I'm still a long way away from being ready for marriage. Victor's my first boyfriend at all, and I'm certainly not going to run off with him. I might, Ginny smirked, and Hermione elbowed her friend. I say, tell Harry how you feel, enjoy your time together, and then remember it fondly, Hermione smiled. Which is what I've been telling you, Hannah said proudly. Susan grimaced and then shut her books, packing everything up. She then looked at them all angrily. You guys just don't understand. With that, she left the library. Hannah sighed and looked at the rest of the group. She's afraid that he'll reject her. She had a thing for Zacharias Smith. She asked him out, and he was a real jerk to her, Hannah groaned. Then, of course, her boobs started coming in, and Zack immediately regretted his choice of words. I think she's afraid the same thing would happen with Harry. Not to mention the fact that she obviously doesn't want to start something destined to end, Neville remarked. Mandy sighed. She decided then and there to approach Harry and see how he felt about the Hufflepuff redhead. Perhaps if she could get Susan and Harry together, her friend would decide to stay at Hogwarts. She felt a twinge of guilt, because she knew he didn't want anyone to influence his decision. But the wise Ravenclaw knew there was no way Harry could not have people influencing him, unless he isolated himself. He'd gotten plenty of negative persuasion, it was time for some positive. Harry lay down in his bed after another session of practice with the 3 other champions. As the task was now just under a week away, this was to be the last session. The 4 champions decided to spend the rest of the time resting and spending time with their friends. Harry liked that idea. He felt as if he hadn't spent any time with any of his friends for months. He'd really been missing the different interactions. Especially with Susan. When he thought about the redhead, Harry was overwhelmed by a flurry of mixed emotions. Susan was gorgeous, Harry never denied it. She was smart and fun and just amazing. She had been one of his best friends at Hogwarts, next to Cedric and Neville. Hermione had the potential to be a really great friend, but as she spent most of her time with Krum, they had drifted apart a bit. She always talked to him in classes and in the halls, but with Victor taking up much of her time, Harry and Hermione had hardly spent significant amounts of time together since before the Yule Ball. Still, Harry counted her as one of his closest friends at Hogwarts. Susan, though, had something special, though Harry was hard-pressed to put it into words, even to himself. He had never felt truly uncomfortable around her like he had with Tracy, or Mandy, or even Luna. He'd been fighting his feelings over Susan since before Christmas. He had believed he was doing a good job, too. That is, until Luna caught up with him a few weeks earlier. It had been after dinner on the last Hogsmeade weekend. Luna had caught up with him outside of the Great Hall, her patented dreamy smile on her face, her large blue eyes staring deep into his green ones. "Hello, Harry," she said as she took his arm and began leading him down the hall. "I have been wanting to speak to you alone." "You have?" Harry asked. "Why didn't you just come ask to talk to me?" "I didn't wish to take you away from Susan's company. You see, she's the reason I wanted to talk to you." "What about Susan?" Harry asked a little skeptically. "Do you recall the last talk we had?" Luna asked, looking up meaningfully at Harry, who shrugged. "Yeah, you were telling me about those things, the Crimpled-born Zorax. Crumplehorn Snorkax. Yes, but that isn't the talk I was referring to. It was when you and Mandy were having difficulties after Yule Ball. Do you remember now? When I told you that you and Mandy would be a bad match for you." "Right," Harry said, nodding in remembrance. "Yes, I remember. Do you think Susan and I would be a bad match, as well?" Harry tried, but he'd been unable to keep the disappointment out of his voice. "Actually, I can think of no one better suited for you, and I am curious why you have not yet declared your feelings for her." Luna cocked her head questioningly. "She's a very down-to-earth person, and is very kind to everyone she encounters. Plus, having an aunt as the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement would benefit you greatly." So why haven't you acted? Who says I have feelings for her? Harry asked, a bit troubled that he could be that transparent. It is quite clear to anyone with eyes. The way you look at her, or how you try to touch her hand when she hands you something. How close you walk next to her, or brush strands of hair behind her ear. Were you following us today? Harry asked irritably. He, Susan, Neville and Hannah had spent the day in Hogsmeade together. He had indeed done all of those things while they had been wandering the streets, going from shop to shop. No. Luna shook her head. You did all of those things while in Honeydukes. I happened to be there restocking my supply of licorice wands. I'm quite fond of them, you know. But, that's not important. What is important is you and Susan. She's a fine woman, and I understand why any boy would be attracted to her. She's very buxom, and I've noticed that most boys are fixated on the size of a girl's boobs. Susan also possesses a supple rear end, and her hips suggest that she would be perfect for childbearing. Luna. Harry took a step back, his face turning a deep crimson. Are you not curious about how she would look without her clothing? Luna asked, a bit astonished by Harry's reaction. I. That is. I can't tell you that. Harry stammered and stuttered. Why not? Are we not friends? Isn't this what friends talk about? Should I have told you about how I dream of covering Ron's naked body in chocolate pudding and... Luna. Harry shrieked, grabbing handfuls of his hair and stepping away from the blonde. We are friends, but I don't ever want to hear about your Ron fantasies. So, can we discuss you and Susan, then? Yes, but let's leave the... Let's just not talk about her parts, okay? Harry sighed, staring wide-eyed at the blonde, who merely shrugged and took Harry's arm again. Why have you not begun courting her? Luna, the year's almost over. I've got the last task ahead, and I need to focus. Then, I don't know. I'm supposed to go back to Salem. I may never see her again. What do you think will happen when you return to your school? Will you try and date that girl you talk about so much? Luna asked seriously. I don't know, Harry said honestly. Harry hadn't really thought much about Stacy since he'd seen her at the second task. He'd written to her, but not nearly as often as he'd written to Mark. He still cared for Stacy, there was no doubt in his mind about that, but he just didn't feel as strongly for her as he once did. Harry wasn't sure if it was because they'd been apart for so long, or if it was his growing feelings for Susan, or if there was something else at work here. No matter what, I can't start dating Susan now, and then turn around and have to leave at the end of the year. Harry shrugged. It would be completely unfair to her. To us both, really. But you don't have to leave. I know that you have the option to remain at Hogwarts if you choose to, Luna said, making Harry stop dead and stare at the nearly ethereal blonde in wonder. How do you know about that? Harry wondered if Mandy, the only person he'd revealed that information to, had been unable to keep her silence. Professor Remus and your godfather were discussing it when I came to check on you in the hospital wing after the first task. I overheard them, Luna admitted. I think I understand why you've not spoken of it to anyone. People would be falling all over themselves trying to impress you or trying to influence your decision. But, it's been happening. Your friends have been influencing your decision and they aren't even aware they're doing it. I suppose so, Harry admitted. Everyone deserves to be happy. I'm not saying that you and Susan will grow up to be married and live happily ever after, but you could. To use your own words, do you really want to go through life wondering what could have been? Harry smiled at Luna and hugged her. I'll think about it, all right. He smiled. See that you do. It's quite exhausting pointing out the obvious to you. Luna smiled, and kissed his cheek before she skipped away. Harry could only watch her go. If he was thankful for anything at Hogwarts, it was Luna Lovegood. She had given him his first real kiss, and had been there every time he really needed good advice. She was something special. Harry would miss her the most if he chose to return to Salem. Harry sighed when he thought back to that conversation. He had a lot to think about. With the end of the year fast approaching, Harry knew that Dumbledore and his godfather would be wanting to hear if he wished to stay at Hogwarts. It was true that he'd been enamored by the school. How could he not have been, growing up and hearing stories about what his godfather, father, and their friends got up to in their days as students here? Yet, his own experience had been very different than the stories. Never had he heard about his father having to fight a dragon, or having to jump into the lake to save a bunch of people. In fact, Harry thought with grim disappointment, he'd only gotten to prank one person while he'd been here. However, the thought of Pansy's expanded posterior made him smile. It had been a really good prank. But, there were so many others that were begging to get pranked, Malfoy and Weasley at the top of his list. Malfoy just because he was an obnoxious pain, and Weasley because someone needed to give Weasley a nudge to make him worthy of Luna's affections. Harry's mind drifted to his old friends. Staying at Hogwarts would, of course, saying goodbye to Mark, Duncan and Stacy. Harry wondered why he'd barely thought of his former crush in the last 2 months. He was afraid now that he no longer felt strongly for her because he'd been away for so long. Plus, he now had feelings for Susan. Harry pushed all thoughts of girls out of his mind as one big question that had haunted Harry ever since he'd learned his parents were killed by some psychotic wizard. Why? He had asked Dumbledore when he'd first arrived at Hogwarts. The old headmaster had promised to tell him everything if he survived the tournament. Harry had every intention of doing that. He'd allied the 3 other champions, and they were going to walk out of that maze shoulder to shoulder, carrying the Triwizard Cup as equals, as true champions. And then, Harry would ask Dumbledore again why his parents had died, and why the Dark Lord known as Voldemort had wished to kill him. Then, he would figure out what he wanted to do about staying at Hogwarts, or returning to his old life. Please like and subscribe.